I see new faces that we haven't seen in this course yet, and this is the last session. So I'm wondering what brings people in to discuss such a joyous topic.
Because
You'll have to do a recap of the
You want to know the answer?
Yeah, because the very last session, you're gonna tell us the answer.
How to fix it.
I'll have to fix it. I did say,
Ask us
I'm gonna ask you?
how to fix it.
Right, definitely.
all the answers.
I don't have the answers.
For sure.
Actually, Lisa and I were just reading a piece that I think we should read together maybe a little bit. Who heard of this woman called Dara Horn?
Yeah.
Yeah? Who wrote, apparently she's a very well-known American novelist, says Wikipedia, her page on Wikipedia. And she wrote a book called what's it called? People Love Dead Jews.
Yeah.
Or Why People Love Dead Jews. Why? No, there is no why. It's a fact, without a why. People love dead Jews. Anybody heard of it?
No.
All right. I invite whoever wants to read the book and have a book club on this book. I would love to read the book and discuss it. But in the meantime, she wrote an article that was published a week ago on the Atlantic. And literally, wherever I go, everybody talk about it. I was at this conference with LA Voice earlier this morning, and on the lunch table, everybody were talking about it, and it sounds really familiar. And then I realized that I received it multiple times from colleagues in Israel. So I really, really had the full intention to read it. It's 11 pages PDF before tonight. I did not get to do that, but Lisa and I just read a little bit. So just to get us started, here is that. No, that's not what I want to do. This is this.
article's a little different.
Oh, okay.
It's about
Alright.
the time.
How do I make it big?
There.
I know. Some things I know.
Whoa, look
Wow.
at that.
Look at that.
I'm impressed. You need to
Right?
get my face though, then we'll be okay.
All right, let's choose a few. So the title is Why the Most, this
Oh,
is
yeah,
an
I
excellent
saw that.
title. You've seen this? Read
Yeah,
it?
but I haven't read it.
Did not read it. Okay. Why the most educated people in America fall for anti-Semitic lies?
I didn't read it, but I saw that. I did.
The whole thing or the headline?
Well, no, you click on it and
Right.
there it is.
Ah, okay. So why the most educated people in America fall for anti-Semitic lies at Harvard and elsewhere, and old falsehood is capturing new minds.
Oh, good.
And you see, it's from February 15th, so it's very
Recent.
yes, what? Current. Maybe we just read one.
Rabbi Lana, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, that's not good. Thank you for telling me. Oh, where should we go to the DVD? 1 second. It's actually good. It's kind of summarizing a little what we learned already.
I can't read that fast.
Okay, where is the Zoom? Here's the Zoom.
Oh, wow.
What? Okay, oh. Hi, everyone. Here it is. Okay, now?
Yes, covered.
Oh, but now it's, okay.
Sorry.
You make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, let me get rid of the people. again. Hold on, 'cause then you'll-
Don't get rid of the people. We
You
want the
don't wanna
people.
get rid- We still need to see them.
Okay, no, it's fine. You can do that.
I can. Okay. It makes the screen bigger and we can read more.
Hi, people. They're not on the screen. Let's see.
Now I can read.
All right.
Okay, we're not gonna read the whole thing. If you don't have it, I'm happy to send it to you, to email it to you afterwards. With a couple of other things that I have in mind to send people that want. But just really kind of to get a feel. It also does a really good job summarizing a lot of the things we talked about, since not everybody were with us, then it can bring everybody into the picture. All right, so she says in Congress, all three, so she talks about the campuses, right? All three universities, she talks about Harvard, UPenn and MIT. So in Congress, all three university presidents offered some version of platitudes that hatred comes from ignorance and education is the answer. I wanted to shout, this is my motto in life, that education is the answer against ignorance. But then she says, but if hatred comes from ignorance, why were America's best universities full of this very specific ignorance? And why were so many people trying to justify it, explain it away, or even deny it? And then I'll just jump here. Let's go to this. She talks about this book in 2013. David Nuremberg published an astonishing book titled Anti-Judaism. And remember, by the way, that we talked about the term anti-Semitism, that is relatively a new term. So anti-Jewish sentiment, this is something that existed from the beginning of time, so to speak, right? But we did not have a term to call the phenomena of people being anti-Jewish or anti-Judaism until the 19th century, when the term anti-Semitism was actually kind of established, and this is what we use today. So she's talking about this book that is called Anti-Judaism, and the argument of the book, which is very, very, very long, bringing Western cultures, including Christianity and Islam, that for the sake of the argument are considered as Western cultures and civilizations. And this person is a historian who resists generalizations and avoids connecting the past to contemporary events. But even one who reads through his carefully assembled records of 23 centuries, wars of intellectual leaders articulating their society's ideals by loudly rejecting whatever they consider Jewish, this deep neural groove in Western thought becomes difficult to dismiss, its patterns unmistakable. And then she gives some examples from what he's saying. For example, dynamic forces Jews into a defensive mode of constantly proving that they are not evil, and even simply that they have a right to exist. And a specific example, around 38 CE, after rioters in Alexandria destroyed hundreds of Jewish homes and burned Jews alive, the Jewish Alexandrian intellectual Philo and non-Jewish Alexandrian intellectual Apion both sailed to Rome for a debate before Emperor Caligula about whether Jews deserved citizenship. Apion believed that Jews held an annual ritual in which they kidnapped a non-Jew. Listen up, we did not talk about that. We talked about a different kind of mystery. So this is a new one. So they kidnapped the non-Jew, fattened the non-Jew, and then ate him. Caligula delayed Philo's rebuttal for 5 months and then listened to him only while consulting with designers on palace decor. Alexandrian Jews lost their citizenship rights, though it took until 66 CE for 50,000 more of them to be slaughtered for this myth fable. I'll jump just to get to today. Okay. I've been thinking about Nuremberg's thesis in the months since October 7 massacre in Israel, during which Hamas, we know what happened, I'm gonna jump. And then she talks right here, shortly after the attacks, a Cornell professor publicly proclaimed the barbarity of the October 7 massacre as exhilarating and energizing, while a Columbia professor called it awesome and also referred to it as an achievement. Comparable praise percolated through America's top universities, coming from students and faculty alike. On campuses around the country, students began gathering regularly to chant, "There is no one solution, Intifada revolution," a reference to a suicide bombing campaign in Israel a generation ago that maimed and murdered well over 1,000 Jews. If there's only one solution, perhaps one should call it the final solution. And this is only page 2. Welcome to anti-Semitism in North America version of the 21st century. So this is the class that you all came to. And this is only our last chapter. But seriously, I'm definitely gonna read through the article, but I intend to purchase the book and read the book. So if anybody wanna join me and discuss it afterwards, I'm happy to set a date for that. But in the meantime, what are some thoughts that people have? I know that it's been 2 weeks since we last met. Our bright yellow color. Okay.
You're not sharing it on Zoom though.
I know, trying. There we go. Sorry.
God bless.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Okay. We're not gonna go through everything we talked about, just a reminder, but before we go there, we started with kind of the beginning of history. We covered almost 2,000 years. We talked about the different genres of anti-Semitism. And then we got to the end of the 19th century when the Jewish people start fleeing from Europe, first in small numbers coming to America, create the Jewish problem in America that did not exist when there were no Jews. And then we arrived to the massive immigration of Jews from Europe, close to 3 million people that are coming here in the change of a century, and sort of everything that occurs with that. And we'll go quickly to the century in order to come back to today. So some thoughts or questions or anything that people kind of lingered during the 2 weeks that we didn't see each other on this topic. No, you sleep good at
Well,
night? It's
other than
okay.
it's-
Nothing is concerning,
It's overwhelming.
right? Please.
I have a thought because we were talking, when you look at Germany. When Hitler took over, Hitler didn't suddenly change the German people. There was a long
Definitely.
history of
Yeah,
anti-Semitism in
absolutely.
Germany. And he built on it
Yep.
and through his propaganda machine was able to get all the German people to follow him. The same thing is going on at the universities. When I was in university many years ago, a university you're very familiar with, because we talked about, there was, the anti-Vietnam movement. There was also, even at that time, there was trying to link the Palestinian struggle against Israel with the struggle of the Vietnamese against the Americans. So this is not new.
Mhm.
It's been going on for 40, 50 years, but it's coming into prominence now because of everything.
Mhm. Okay. Anything else? All right, let's stroll down. So really quickly to be on the same page. We talked about really the very beginning of the small Jewish group that arrives here from South America to Newport, Rhode Island, the Torah Synagogue, the beautiful letter, the manifesto that George Washington is writing in order to welcome the Jewish community over there. So the beginning was very, very promising, but of course, as things evolve, then we talked about the Bill of Rights in 1791 that was against Jews and against the Catholics and against the Mormons and against the Muslims and against the atheists. So the history of American Jews really goes hand in hand with rise of anti-Semitism. The more Jews there were, the more anti-Semitism, and this unfortunately how it works all over the world, not only in this country. We talked about the 13 first settlements, and of course, in all of them, there were Jewish populations. So it spread out according to geography. In the middle of the 19th century, we talk about 200,000 Jews that leave Europe and come here. And that is, of course, after the choice for them needed to be made to leave or to stay. And those who chose to leave where to go to then Palestine, to someplace else. South America was an option for a little bit. And then, of course, most of the European Jews are choosing to come to this concept of the land of opportunities, the golden Medina. And we also talked that for most of them, the big dream did come true. They were able to become definitely the middle class, a lot of them the upper middle class, and at least kind of on the social, economic arena to be pretty successful and also to feel that they have arrived home. If you remember, I think that's where we ended last time. We talked about specifically the reform movement. By the way, I'm happy to announce our next class after this. It's going to be the history of the reform movement, starting on March something at the end, last week of March. But I remember that we talked that for the reform Jews that came from Germany to America, the changes that they made specifically here in this country, they were very, very mindful about. For example, no longer praying for the Messiah to come and to go back to the land of Israel, because that has stopped being a destination. They came to America and that became the final destination. So all the changes they made were according to the final destination that they have arrived to. To call a synagogue a temple was intentional because there was no longer the dream of rebuilding a temple in the land of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was still very, very central, but now we're building sanctuaries here at our final destination, and we call them temple because that is now our sanctuary, and this is where we want to be. So things like that really kind of evolved and were very promising. And then we talk about the biggest wave of Jewish immigration at the turn of the century, in the first decade too. We talk about over 2 million of European Jews that come here. A lot of them are coming through Ellis Island, a lot of them coming with no money, and they have no ability to continue from Ellis Island to more remote places. So a lot of them are settling down on the mainland in New York City, which until today is the largest Jewish city in America. And kind of settling down as the middle class. And I think this is where we stopped, right? I don't think we talked about Leo Frank, did we?
No.
No, okay. So a couple of examples to emphasize, kind of to go deeper in the historic occurrences. Leo Frank was a 29-year-old Jewish man who was working in the factory. He was convicted for murder, and he was in prison. And there was a group of people that decided to abduct him from prison and to give him the punishment that they thought he deserved. And they lynched him in a town square and, of course, executed him. And that created a big turmoil and kind of a sense of the earth shaking, that if he did a crime, there was a court system, he went through the court system, he received his punishment, but that was not enough. He was also Jewish, above all. And so this group of people felt like they need to go above and beyond the official legal system and to create what they created. And this was a picture in the newspapers and created a lot of riot. Is this a familiar story? Do people know about it? I see some you saying yes and some saying no. It happened on the East Coast in Atlanta, it's some God forbidden place, and became a big story. And it led to a lot of discrimination and civil society that really kind of took a big stand on anti-Semitism. So if we're talking about universities, here we have the beginning of the university journey. In 1922, the Harvard's president understands that more and more students coming to his university are Jewish students, and he wants to make sure that the number stays set and doesn't go above a certain quote. So as early as 1922, just think about it, this is 100 years ago. And it's interesting how to think about these 100 years, right? I mean, for American history, how old is America? 350? 350? How many?
Almost 250.
250. So 100 years is a half plus. When we talk about Jewish American history, then of course it's less, but still 100 years ago, the president of one of the elite universities says, let's only have 15% Jewish students, make sure that it will not go over, and there will be no more anti-Semitism, only 15%. And other universities follow that quote, whether it's Yale, Princeton, Columbia, and others. We get to all kind of different anti-Jewish restrictions and fraternities in clubs, in resorts, in hotels, in particular neighborhoods. I remember the first time somebody told me why so many hospitals in America have Jewish names, like Mount Sinai or Cedar Sinai and all of that. And I remember that I was astonished when I learned about the actual reason that Jewish doctors and Jewish patients were not allowed in regular American hospitals. So they went and they became doctors and they opened up their own. And I literally remember the feeling that I couldn't believe that that was the actual reality in this concept of the land of all opportunities, the Golden Medina, that things like that actually happened. But again, I feel awkward being the only non-American in the room talking about issues that you grew up with. So I'm just, what?
Also, probably no women were attending classes, many of those fine institutions.
Yeah.
Were or were not?
Or not.
Oh, we're not. Are you putting us in the same category?
I wasn't saying it was.
Similar.
Right. It's like Rabbi Paul always makes fun of me when I make it a point to introduce somebody who is a female rabbi. And he always tells me, I know that you're speaking like a true Israeli. And it's like, here in America, it's not an issue that a woman is a rabbi. So there is no need to emphasize that it's a female rabbi. Because in Israel, it's a big deal. So if it's a woman rabbi, you always say, you also like, you know, it's a gender language. So in the language, it will be like, even if I will not say the word woman, the way I will say it, it will be clear. But anyway, so thank you for bringing this up. So really all over kind of the civil society, when there were unions, when there were clubs, when there were schools, when there were public institutions. So there were anti-Jewish restrictions, and sometimes it will actually say no entrance for Jews or no entrance for Hebrews, whether it's hotels, pools. I think I put a picture here somewhere. And then that I'm sure you know, the Jim Crow legislation that marginalized African Americans from participating fully in aspects of society. So I don't want to say it's the same. One day maybe we'll look at those two groups together. But there was definitely a lot of sentiment. And we know that African Americans community and the Jewish community over the years, especially over the civil rights movement, with some big name rabbis that were marching together with Martin Luther King. So there were a lot of similarities and kind of feeling of same kind of destiny per se. Again, not in the same ground. I don't want to even imply, but there were sentiments that were kind of bringing these two groups together. Here's just an example of what we just emphasized. And there's so many pictures like that.
So many Jewish clubs, social clubs.
Right, and country clubs, right?
Country clubs, right.
Yeah, totally, yeah. So I immediately think of the hotels, not hotels, the hospitals. Because now that I live here, then it's very kind of, it's kind of sticks out, and then I always think about it, but yeah, of course, other clubs as well, yeah.
So when I was growing up, my mother always used to say that the anti-Semites drink it in the mother's milk. You've probably heard that one before. Would suggest that as Europeans come here who are anti-Semitic in their own societies, they bring that with them. On the other hand, Americans didn't like the Irish, didn't like the Catholics, didn't like the Mormons. How did?
Yeah, and we said that, yeah.
Yeah, so we're unique in a way, in terms of why they hate us. because they hate other people too,
right,
but a little differently.
right. So,
What are the differences and does it kind of originate in the mother's milk?
wow, that's a very, very big open-end question. So I have several thoughts, and please, if people have thoughts, then share also. One thing, I mean, I do believe in Hebrew there is a saying, "Ha'adam hu nof moladeto," which translates as a person is the consequence of their scenery, which doesn't make any sense what I just said. So I'll explain it better. I tried to literally translate it. That early child education or the household that we are born into and raised in, I believe definitely have an effect on who we are. But at the same time, I think that everything that we experience in life have an effect on us, right? So it starts with our parents in a good case scenario, and then through, all the education system, and then basically all the people that we meet in our life. So they shape our opinions and kind of design who we are, right? So about the mother's milk, I would say yes and no. Probably more yes than no, but. And then the other piece though, and then, Elizabeth, we have.
They just wanna, when you get a question, will you repeat it?
Yes, absolutely. So Ilan is asking a two-part at least question. One, if the feelings of anti-Semitism is kind of people are born into, and whether the Europeans that came from Europe to America brought the feelings of anti-Semitism with them. And the other piece is that inside America, there was a lot of anti-feelings, not only towards Jews, but also towards Catholics and Mormons and peoples of other ethnic groups. So how is the anti-feeling towards Jews is different, right? Did I summarize it?
Yeah.
More or less. Hugh, let's hear you and then.
I was just gonna say, I don't think you're saying it's DNA.
Hmm.
It's brought in, but it's learned, you know.
It's learned, yeah, I definitely think it's learned, yeah. But again, the learning starts early, right? So, yeah, Debbie.
Do you think for whatever reason, there is something in our DNA, maybe that not makes people hate Jews, but that makes people hate the other? I mean, obviously, even just, there's so many examples in any society you go to, there's a dominant group that looks for people that act or look differently and makes you feel more powerful or more secure or whatever it is to be against that group. And I've long felt that the greatest hope for humanity, quite frankly, is an alien invasion, because then we would see what's more similar and we just band together. But I think we look for divisions in every single society around the world throughout history and find someone to pick on, and it has to be a small enough part of the population. And it sure is helpful if there are physical characteristics, dress characteristics, ritual characteristics that you can pick out to identify them.
Right, so for people at home, I'll just repeat did you hear what Debbie just shared? No, so I'll just repeat that Debbie sharing, saying that throughout history, people are always feeling anti-sentiments towards a specific group. And this is sort of something that is common for people. I'll actually take what you're saying and dive even deeper than that. And I will say that stereotypes is something that we are all guilty of. All, me included, everybody. Even the person that considers themselves to be the most righteous person on the planet, we are all guilty of stereotypes. And if we had time, we could have played all kind of different mind games, but they're very, very, very real. If I'll show you a picture of all kind of different people and ask you whether you will reach out to them if you'll see them in the street, in a dark alley or stuff like that. And I'm sure that the answers will be very interesting on one end and not surprising on the other end. Or I'll give you another example. This morning, I found myself in a situation that I kind of had no idea where I'm coming from, but somebody that I respect dearly invited me to participate in specific training. And I found myself in a very high-end hotel in the center of Los Angeles, in a room of probably maybe 200 people. And most of the people, I'll say it as is, were not white. And there were all kind of different people. And I was sitting next to a person that invited me. And suddenly she tells me, how come we are the only Jewish people in the room? And we started thinking about it. And then she said, Jewish people don't come to spaces like that out of choice, which was really, really interesting and astonishing to me. But there is a point to that. People like to be around people who are like them. Look how difficult we work now here at ORME to diversify our community. If you were here on Friday night at the program that we had with the Mosaic Committee and Shonda, April Powers, who is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful leader who is Black and Jewish and many other different things. We're having a whole presentation about how you can be this and this and this and this, but you need to work so hard to make it normal. And we work so hard to diversify. There is a reason to that, because this is kind of nature of humanity, for better or for worse, that people tend to surround themselves with people that are like them. And we are all biased, and we are all guilty of having stereotypes in our mind, built it almost in our DNA, almost, right? And sort of indigenous into us. Having said that, we are independent thinker, and we get our education, and then we live our lives, and we form our opinions. I know to say about myself, I'm 42 years old. I think very differently than my parents on many different issues, including the color of people's skin. And it's just it's just a fact of life, or on LGBTQ, or all kind of different issues. So there is a generational thing, there's an educational thing, there is geographical, there are a lot of components to that. So this is about that. And then about the second piece of what Ilan is asking, I think that, first of all, you're right. And in many places in history, we can see feelings of anti-different groups. Even when they talk about Hitler, by the way, if you go home and you read Mein Kampf, where he lays out the foundations of his theory, kind of, right? It's not only against Jews. It is also against many different groups of people, whether it's handicapped, LGBT, Black, people with all kind of different physical and emotional disabilities, gypsies, of course, right? I mean, it's all there. The fact that we tend to tell the story from a very, very Jewish lens, it's a choice. You know, very often when I take groups, used to take groups to Yad Vashem, the National Holocaust Memorial in Israel, I would get that question that would say, why this museum only talks about the Jewish Holocaust and not about everybody else's? When you go to Washington, D.C., for example, they actually are doing a fantastic job to also educate about other genocide that happened in the world since. It's a choice. So you're right. This course is about specifically anti-Semitism. If it was about, you know,
Human nature.
yeah, human nature, or I don't know, other types of genocides or whatnot, definitely we can teach a lot of what we're teaching here also in the wider lens of what else America as a country is anti, right? Or about white supremacy maybe altogether, and who gets into that and who gets not. But it's a choice. It's a 3-session course. We cannot get to everything. And because each group of people want to educate themselves about the issues that are most burning to them. And since this is an issue that is very, very burning to us, especially here and now, but it's a choice. I mean, we could definitely evolve and develop further and to address other groups. And we did a little bit, kind of, to get into the atmosphere. Other thoughts or questions before we move on to more joyous occurrences? Richard Shamban, are you talking to us or to someone else? Silence. Yeah. I don't know.
He's on mute. He's muted.
If you're talking to us, please unmute.
Did Lisa need all-
I can't.
I was talking to my wife.
That's better. Okay, cool. So let's move on. Okay. Okay. Mass media, something that we talk a lot about, our time, about social media of all kind of different sorts, about, Dara Horn that we started with talks about the 10 seconds attention span on our news, right? When you listen to the news, 10-second attention span to catch the headline or whatever the journalist wants us to catch, right? So we feel almost like it's a modern phenomena, but it's not. And now it's Instagram and Facebook and gazillion of news channels, but it used to be all kind of different things. So the social climate from the early of 20th century in America was influenced by the growing popularity of mass media. Initially, of course, it was newspapers or press and radio, and later on television. And here's a very vivid example of Henry Ford. I think we already mentioned him
Yeah.
in the correlation with Hitler and the Nazi ideology. But here's another example. One of the most powerful and wealthiest Americans from 1920 to 1924 published anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in 91 consecutive issues of his weekly newspaper. And check this out, the amount of people that newspaper reached, over 700,000 people so early as in 1924. And remember, we talked about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, this mythological publication that came out in the 19th century that has this name as if it talks about the chronicles of the Jews. And it's just a huge lie that was distributed all over the world about the Jews. So he's taking his sort of quote unquote knowledge or myths from this publication of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And he makes a new kind of publication out of it, 4-volume, calling it the International Jew. And there he depicts his understanding of who is a Jew, and he sells it to thousands and thousands of people. So again, as you said, that Hitler did not invent almost anything, and we talked about it, right? The yellow star or the yellow patch, the concept of ghettos and other things. So also here, Hitler in Mein Kampf is using for his publications and kind of nurturing on that in his beliefs. Side by side with that, here's another example that was a big figure, a Catholic priest, Charles, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Thank you. So you know about the story, very good.
Ford, we're very close.
There you
They're
go.
both from Detroit.
15 million listeners. 15 million listeners per week. With a lot of propaganda, with anti-Semitic beliefs, justifying Nazi ideology and violence against Jews. And so many people just listened and followed and turned to violence. So some examples of what's happening here in the 1920s and 30s. Immigration laws, somebody already mentioned last time, St. Louis, which is kind of the epic example in everybody's minds, coming up, but the concept that Hitler comes to power and the Jews of Germany and later on other countries of Europe understand, it took them a lot of time to understand, but when they finally got to the understanding that it's no longer safe for them and they need to escape, they need to decide where to go. I didn't place it here, but I'll mention it quickly. 1938, the Avion Conference in South of France, in Avion, when the countries of the world are coming together to discuss the Jewish problem. The United States of America was one of the participating countries that said, sure, we will open our gates, but they put a restriction on the number of how many. And the number was 100,000 people a year. St. Louis went beyond the 100,000 a year and was denied entrance. So this is again just an example. And here, if you look at the second half of the slide, when St. Louis that went to Cuba was denied access in Cuba and then continued to sail to the coast of Florida and Miami, and they were not allowed to board and to leave the boat, a number of passengers from St. Louis sent a telegram to President Roosevelt pleading for asylum, explaining that they have nowhere to go, and the year is already 1939. This is a very, very, very short time from the beginning of World War II. And so President Roosevelt actually received the telegram and even sent an answer through the State Department saying, there's a quote, the passengers must await their turn on the waiting list and qualify for immigration visas before they may be admissible into the United States. By the way, here, Ilan, you might ask, but it's not only America. There were other countries that were denying access, and you will be right, right? For example, in Avian conference, Great Britain, who had the mandate over Palestine, said, sure, we'll hand out 1,000 certificates a month, total of 12,000 a year. That was the reality. Even better, Australia in the Avian conference said, we don't have a Jewish problem. Translation? We have no Jews. So they said, in Avian conference in 1938, they said, we have no Jewish problem. Let's not start one. That was their answer. And they did not let Jewish people in. They opened up their gates only after the end of World War II. And somehow today, Melbourne, Australia has the largest almost number of Holocaust survivors in the world after Israel and America. But it came after. It wasn't during. So yes, but we are zooming in on learning about the country that we're living in right now, right? It doesn't mean that it didn't happen in other places also, but it's just because we are concentrating on here. This is just a nice map to show us the tracking of St. Louis, leaving Germany, going all the way, as I said, to Cuba, turning around, going to Miami, not being allowed in, and then coming back. Almost 1,000 people were on St. Louis, and almost every single one of them lost their lives. Here's some pictures from the boat itself, as they were on the shores of Florida.
I think they let 71 in. I think that was.
Perhaps. And then, of course, during World War II, well, first of all, for the first part of the war, America was not part of the war until, of course, Pearl Harbor, December 1941. The day after Pearl Harbor, United States of America entered the war and kind of rocked the boat for everybody. Nobody was really anticipating that. On the good fronts, I think that a lot of lives in general and a lot of Jewish life in more particular were spared by the fact that the United States of America joined the war. I think that on the Jewish history, it's a given, because Hitler's goal was to annihilate the entire Jewish people all over the world. And until Pearl Harbor, America was not so far away in Hitler's mind. After Pearl Harbor, Hitler understood that that's not going to happen, and he needed only kind of to take the European and North African Jews, but not in other places of the world. So that is given 100%. However, on the flip coin of that, we know for a fact that, I don't know where I put this here, somewhere, that some prisoners escaped Auschwitz and made it after a very, very, very long journey to America. And they sat in the office of President Roosevelt. And as the Allies army, that America was one of them, together with France, England, and Soviet Union, they had pictures taken from the air of Auschwitz-Birkenau. And those two prisoners that escaped were sitting in his office and literally mapping out the entire camp, explaining what is which barrack, which are the crematoriums, which is which. And of course, the decision that needed to be made of whether to bomb Auschwitz or not. And of course, there are claims for each of the sides, but the end game was the decision was not to bomb. And there's a lot into that. By the way, if you ever been to the Washington DC Memorial, or if you will be, they actually are doing an amazing job of taking responsibility for that. And there's a whole section in that memorial dedicated to where was United States of America during the Holocaust, which is kind of incredible. I don't know many countries taking this responsibility. This is United States of America during World War II. Go ahead.
There was a blurb
Go
in
back.
1939. There's a book that I just read, I don't know which way it went, Nazis versus gangsters, or gangsters versus Nazis. The American gangster group did an awful lot against the pro-Nazi German-American Bunds, which I had no idea about until I read this book. It was just brought out in 2022. It's a fabulous chronology of what happened.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So during the war, there was a lot of propaganda and a lot of kind of alignment with everything that was happening in Europe, in America. And just for an example, this is a picture taken during the years of the war in America with swastikas and with kind of putting Hitler on the pedestal and kind of really thinking that whatever is happening is a good thing. And that's already after America joined the war to fight on the side that was against Nazi Germany. And signs of swastika, unfortunately, have not lost our world. Now, I'll just say kind of in parentheses that, as I'm sure you know, swastika, it's not a unique sign for Hitler or Nazism. It's actually a symbol taken from India and from the Hindus. And if you step feet in a Hindu temple until today, whether it's in India or in Malibu or anywhere else, the entire sanctuary is filled with the signs. And it doesn't represent anything bad, on the contrary, which always kind of creates a paradox for Jews. When we see the sign, immediately, everything shrinks in our insides, but it actually has a message of peace initially, but not in the world that we live in, not in the Western world, I should say, okay? Not in the Western world. And unfortunately, in the Western world, which America is part of, the swastika sign is still very much present to this day. I think last week, I want to say a few weeks ago, but I think it was last week,
Nashville.
the parade in Nashville.
Nashville this past weekend.
Yeah.
But they
Less than a week ago. So
Citizens booted them out, though.
what?
The citizens booted them out. They literally
But
had,
it still happened.
Yeah, yes, and. Okay, yes, and it happened. So this is a picture, I believe, from the 1960s, or something in that area. Again, the Catholic priest that we mentioned earlier is still with us during the war, selling many copies with his propaganda, siding with Hitler. And just look at the last sentence, 44. It's a year before the end of the war. 60% of Americans claim to have heard recent criticism or talk against Jews. And becoming anti-Semitic became kind of the new normal. It was not something that was viewed as not correct or not good. Post-World War II, I'm kind of running because I want us to get to today. A little shift in anti-Semitism. So first of all, there were a lot of Jewish soldiers in all armies. But again, zooming in on this country, so over 500,000 Jewish soldiers were fighting in the American army alongside their friends during the war, and about 36,000 of them were decorated for their bravery after the war. The Holocaust became more and more known after the war, especially, of course, with the upgrowing numbers of Holocaust survivors that came to this country. And of course, you're all familiar with the sentiment of so many of them that lived the entire life without talking a word about what have happened to them. But nevertheless, even if they didn't talk, they were here and the numbers were on their hands, and the stories came out, and it definitely became a big story and a shaping story in the identity, in forming Jewish identity of the generation of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and to a certain extent, even today. Personally, I believe less so today, but definitely, you know, in the second half of the 20th century, the Holocaust, with everything that it entailed, was definitely the design of Jewish identity in America, also in Israel, differently, but nevertheless. So there was some change, and the main change came in 1965, not only America, but also here, and that is the Second Vatican Council. We talked about the foundations of anti-Semitism, and that is the foundation between Judaism and Christianity. And for 2000 years, the foundations of the church that were putting the blaming finger towards the Jewish people for killing the Messiah and everything that comes with it. I don't want to repeat, but in 1965 was a big game changer in that. And that's the Second Vatican Council, where for the first time, the Pope, the father of Catholicism, came up publicly and basically said, we were wrong for 2000 years. Everything that we said, did, distributed, and so on, it was wrong. It was a mistake. And everything that happened for the 50 plus years after definitely shifted and changed a lot of the discourse between Catholicism and Judaism and other Christian denominations for sure. So of course that influenced also the relationship between the two religions over here. I think we kind of talked about the civil rights movement. Let's move on. There's some
You
more
know,
of
the
the
article,
same.
the article doesn't address Lindbergh, who had the celebrity, and he was a rabid anti-Semite, and he carried his themes far and wide, so his impact should have been up there with everybody else.
Okay.
It was mentioned.
It was. Yeah. Okay, let's jump to today. Okay, so before October 7th, we're definitely experiencing something different than what we're experiencing right now. And then, unfortunately, in the time that we are living in right now, there are new shapes and forms of anti-Semitism. And there are new words that are added to anti-Semitism. Anti-Israelism, anti-Zionism, anti-Judaism is making a comeback. And all of these kind of are mixing together, and in the eyes of many people kind of becoming one. And a lot of people built up organizations and coalitions and lobbying, trying to figure out, is it all the same? It is all different. And what do we need to do about it? I'm happy to share if you want the slides afterwards, but just kind of to maybe to mention a few kind of more recent and famous occurrences. Charlottesville, Virginia, in 2017, a group of neo-Nazis and other extremists went onto the streets and started protesting and yelling things like, Jews will not replace us. Jews are conspiring to destroy pure white American society. A woman was killed as a result of those protests. And we can see kind of an upkind of anti-Semitic incidents growing during the last 6-7 years. Organization that I want us to mention is ADL, Anti-Defamation League, that makes it a point to track all anti-Semitic occurrences, incidents that are happening in this country. It can be by a not proper look or words, or God forbid, actions of violence. And they have records and they track, they've been around for about 40 years or so, I believe. And you can go on their website and just by state and by city, by year, see the number of incidents and what happened in every single one of them. And we see that starting with 2016 and 2017, all over the country, there is a big rise of anti-Semitic incidents. This is a picture from Virginia, from Charlottesville. I'm sure to some of you it reminds prehistoric marches in this country, in other places. Just mention this. 2018, of course, Pittsburgh, Tree of Life. It was 5 years this past October. A man that ran into the synagogue on Shabbat morning, yelling, "All Jews must die," killing 11, wounding 6. Definitely the most deadly violence attack against Jews on American soil. And of course, in everybody's memory. This is just outside of the synagogue in Pittsburgh, a memorial that they held. The Chabad in San Diego, which is not far from here. In 2019, anti-Semitic violence in New York City, that is kind of on the rise. A lot of it is coming from the ultra-Orthodox communities like Monsey, but not only. Here's another genre of modern anti-Semitism towards people that look Jewish, whether it's kosher markets or just kind of humiliating people walking on the streets, vandalism and so on. And then, of course, the most modern piece, and that is just bringing everything together. This is from 2014. This was the last big war with Gaza before we knew what is big. The kid here is Mohammed Abagdir. If you remember in the early, that summer, the war started with 3 young Jewish Israeli teens that were kidnapped by terrorists in the West Bank. And after 3 weeks, they were found dead in the pit hole in the West Bank. And a group of Jewish youngsters went on a revenge attack and kidnapped a 16-year-old Palestinian from an East Jerusalem neighborhood and burned him down alive in the forest outside of Jerusalem, and everything got escalated, and we went into a 50-day war at that time of that summer, which was considered epic. It's just, here we are 10 years later, and we already entered the 5th month of a war. But of course, Israel, racism, genocide, comparing Israel to the Ku Klux Klan, standing up with Gaza against Israel genocide, very, very similar kind of to a lot of the signs that we see in protests nowadays. And of course, the new forms of anti-Semitism, another one that I forgot to mention, and that is the BDS movement, which became very apparent and vocal in the last 20 years, especially on college campuses, but not only. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions initiatives that over the years, for example, went on campaigns of not purchasing products produced in the West Bank territories and stuff like that. And of course,
University of Davis just this week, $20 million
there you go.
divested.
Yeah.
In California.
Yeah. And then again, and I'm happy to open this up a little bit because over the years when I was doing Jewish education out of Israel, I received multiple times the question, do I think anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism equals anti-Israelism? And I must be very, very honest and say that for many, many, many years, I thought that my answer is no. I thought that people that say anti-Zionism have something one in mind. And it's not necessarily that a person who is anti-Zionist or anti-Israel is immediately anti-Semite. I no longer think that after October 7th, but it doesn't mean it's the truth. I come from a very different background and view the current events also from a very particular lens. So I'm happy to open it up for a minute or two. What do people think? Whether all of these kind of new forms are genres of the same story that we have witnessed for over 2,000 years, or this is specific for the time in history that we are in right now, and whether anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism is the same. Because definitely one of the forms that this plays out is that the non-Jews, when they meet a Jewish person, they look at the Jewish person as a collective responsible for everything that goes on, including the current war in Israel. There's definitely a lot of ignorance, because even within Israel, people are not thinking the same, even about the war. But I'm sure that we have and familiar with this experience that when the non-Jew meets the Jew, especially now, then we become the collective responsibility for everything that is going on.
I think
Yeah.
all these different words and different, makes people feel better. I'm not anti-Semitic, I just am BDS, or I'm just, it makes them feel better that they can call it different things, but still the same thing.
Interesting. Lisa, go ahead.
What I struggle with is movements that are marginalized, such as like Black Lives Matter, for example, align with BDS, right? This is like an actual thing. Like Black Lives Matter has supported BDS for years and years. The question is, when we support a people through their struggles and then they're not supporting us, how does that?
So I do want to say something. So Lisa is talking about for people at home about
The actual organization.
right, as an example of Black Lives Matters, that I'll expand on a little bit, that once upon a time viewed the Jewish people, definitely in this country, as allies, and now support BDS, which makes them kind of on the counter side. I think I shared this here, but I'm not sure what I shared with whom. So I'll just say for the sake of everybody, I had a very informative education about a year and a half ago when I took a group of African-American social justice leaders to Israel. And that trip was led by Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who is the head of our movement in North America, Rabbi Jonah Pasner, who is the head of RAC, and myself. And the little that I knew, really, and I had no chance to know, because I did not grow up here. I grew up in Israel, and the non-white people in Israel are Ethiopian Jews, and that's a whole other conversation about racism and everything that follows. But what I learned very quickly, and it was very eye-opening to me, that for the Black people in this country, they truly for years and years and years looked at the Jews as allies, because they viewed themselves and the Jews as a minority. And on the basis of minorities, the friendship and the collaboration kind of was formed, that came to be. And then the same Black people go to Israel, and the Jewish people that in their mind are the minority in America, in Israel are the majority. And the minority is a completely different people. By the way, again, in parentheses, number-wise, that's not true. Number-wise, it's an equal number almost today of Palestinians and Jews in the land of Israel, between the river to the sea. It is very even possible that there's a slightly larger number of Palestinians than Jews, okay? But because of the power structure, and of course, the reality of one nation having a country and the other nation not having a country, they're viewed as the underdog and the minority, and therefore the minority always will be the friend of the minority. And suddenly the Jews that in this country are the minority become the white supremacists and the power And that completely flips the conception and the ideology. And I had no idea that that's the case until I spent that precious time with this group of really incredible individuals, very, very bright, intelligent, compassionate, lead huge organizations here. And it was very, 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 very challenging, but that's sort of the way they view the world. So I don't know if it answers, Lisa, but maybe just gives another light to what you're saying.
Yeah, by the way, the problem that the Democratic Party has with Joe Biden, with minority, especially the Black culture, why there's been such a split, is because a number of the Black groups feel that the oppression. Then they look at Gaza and go, they draw the analogy between the oppression in Gaza
Absolutely.
and the local oppression.
Yeah.
And we have gone down such a terrible road. I know when Brooke and I were at Temple Judea, probably 20 years ago, we had a gospel group come into Judea, and it was a rollicking great time. Now we can't even think about it, I guess. I don't know why.
And to emphasize even further, and this is, I'm just saying for us to be mindful, because again, here at RME, we now put a lot of effort to engage and to bring and to expand and diversify. And we put a lot of even specifically impact on Jews of color, talking about Jews of all kind of different colors, but more specifically, Black Jews. I think that the Black Jewish community, which by the way, believe it or not, is growing in North America, whether we know about it or not, but they find themselves in the most challenging situation. And I had some really deep conversation with such individuals that receiving kind of the blaming finger from both of the societies that they belong to, from the Black community and from the Jewish community. And I just want us to be aware of this challenge because it's very, very, very real. They want to fit in there and they want to fit in there. And most of all, they want to do both. And in the political climate that have been sort of created, it's a very, very big challenge to be in their shoes and in their position.
Didn't the individual who ran for the Republican to take over whatever his name is, wasn't she an Ethiopian Jew? The Republican?
That you're talking about in New York?
Yes. She was an Ethiopian Jew?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That is beyond my current knowledge, so I will invite us to continue. Couple of numbers, and then we're gonna talk about what can be done, right? Because we cannot
promise.
end in despair. So first all numbers, ADL, which really has the most accurate records of anti-Semitic incidents, just look in 2022, recorded 3,697, very precise, anti-Semitic incidents, which is the highest number in the records of ADL since they began doing the tracking and the kind of keeping track on the records from 1979. And that is in 2022, which means before October 7th. And then if you look at 2023, and this number here only depicts the last 3 months of 2023, meaning after October 7th until the end of December, 3,283 incidents in 3 months. It's over 300% increase in 3 months. And it's national. And unfortunately, it's growing. And unfortunately, it's everywhere, including 5 minutes from here.
Yep.
And I'm going to end up with an example that some of you already know, but not everybody. So what can or should we do? First of all, some good news. Remember the sculpture that we talked about in the first session?
Yeah.
Iglesia, a synagoga, the 2 sculptures representing the church and the synagogue, really going all the way back to the very, very beginning of this route of anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, the Iglesia on the right, looking down, blindfolded. Sorry, the synagogue on the right, looking down. Why nobody is correcting me?
We knew what you meant.
So the synagogue looking down, blindfolded, humiliated, and of course the ecclesia, the church on the left, looking up, having a crown, know its place in the world. This sculpture have been in many, many museums all over the world. And then a nice tribute. St. Joseph University in Philadelphia. Have anybody familiar with that campus? In 2014. I also am not familiar, but I was happy to learn about it. They commissioned a large sculpture by Joshua Kaufman showing the pair, Iglesia and synagogue, in harmony. And the sculpture was commissioned to mark the 50th anniversary of the Nostra Aetate, which is the name of the Second Vatican Council from 1965, to show the mutuality and the new relationship. By the way, this is a beautiful quote from the dedication of the sculpture from September 2015, and the blessing was by Pope Francis. We hold the Jewish people in special regard because their covenant with God has never been revoked, for the gifts and the call of God are irrevocable. Dialogue and friendship with the children of Israel are part of the life of Jesus' disciples. The friendship which has grown between us makes us bitterly and sincerely regret the terrible persecutions which they have endured and continue to endure, especially those that have involved Christians. God continues to work among the people of the Old Covenant and to bring forth treasures of wisdom which flow from their encounter with his word. For this reason, the church also is enriched when she receives the values of Judaism. And the sculpture looks like this.
Nice.
So this is just for inspiration that things can be better. When there is a will, there is a way. And then what can be done? Three organizations. There are way more than three, but let's start with three. American Jewish Committee. This is an organization that I personally follow, and so I invite you to do the same. The American Jewish Committee, they have a call for action at Congress, Act Against Rising Anti-Semitism. They have a very, very long report showing all kind of different numbers and figures of incidences happening in Jewish institutions and other institutions across the country in 2023. And they really call people for action, especially on the political arena. So if you are interested in doing that, that is available for everybody. Go on their website, American Jewish Committee. The second that I mentioned is ADL, which truly has the data, but not only data. They are number one in data, but they have events, they have classes, they have gatherings, they have all kind of different events. If you, of course, know, or God forbid, if you are part of an incident, please report it. You can advocate with ADL, you can attend an event, you can bring ADL, we're kind of doing that, not in a formal way, to our community, bring ADL to your workplace. If you have children or grandchildren in schools or campuses, and they are sharing with you over Shabbat dinner of an incident that they heard, please don't leave it hanging. Report it and know that you can invite somebody from ADL to come and speak at that school and to have an educational session with the teachers, with the trainers, with the classes. It's equipped for all different age groups. And they do it all the time. And it's a tool that is around, it exists, and it's powerful. They are organizing a summit that is coming up. I'm sure there's going to be more. And there's also a leadership institute that you can be part of. So all of that and more on ADL. And a third organization that I thought would be nice to know about called Combat Anti-Semitism Movement for the Jewish people, their homeland, and humanity. This is a global coalition that has over 700 partner organizations that are collaborating with them, and 3 million people from diverse backgrounds of religion, politics, culture, and the common ground that binds us together is to combat anti-Semitism. If you'll go on their website, you can see all those 700 organizations, but also all the different invitations that they have for people to participate in all kind of different work that they do. The reform movement is definitely a really, really big player in the current field of combating anti-Semitism on many different arenas. Probably the most important one is RAC. And RAC has this incredible document with, they actually have 2 documents that you can either go on their website and find it, or you can email me, rabbiilana@orami.org, and I'll be more than happy to share those 2 documents with you. One talks about some data, but you don't need to attend a 9-hour course. You can just read 2 pages and it's in bullet points. And the second document gives you talking points. It's like education on the go. What to do if you find yourself in a situation that you're being accused of A, B, and C, and for you not to feel numb about it, but to be able to respond immediately, but from a place of power, education, like Debbie did when she was part of the group of NPR. NPR. So it's very, very, very helpful, and it's truly awesome. And it's literally 2 pages with bullet points, talking points on how you can address a lot of the things that we talked about. And for inspiration, 3 weeks ago, I was fortunate to spend the weekend with these incredible teens in Washington, DC with RAC. We learned about all kinds of different issues of social justice. And at the end, the teens needed to choose a topic that they are passionate about. And they learned how to write an effective speech. And then we went to the Capitol Hill and we lobbied, and we met 2 Congress people and 1 representative of the House, and lobbied about issues that were of interest to them. So the 3 issues that were chosen among 17s, they were so passionate that we wanted them to have 2 groups, but they wanted to talk about it all. So we needed to let go and just help them to be successful and have their way. One was about gun violence prevention. The other one was about mental health. And the other one was about anti-Semitism. And as you know, that at the core of every single successful speech is a personal story. And every single one of them had multiple personal stories on every single one of these 3 major issues. So for inspiration, I ask permission. So I would like to share with you the speech that our teens, people at home, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
They can?
Yep.
Okay, how do I make it bigger? Here. Okay. Really for an inspiration. This is a speech that was written in a very, very short time, relatively speaking, by teenagers who are 16 and 17 years old, with so much courage and boldness and pain and belief that what they're saying needs to be spoken and needs to be heard. And it was just absolutely unbelievable to just tag along with them, literally, and just to see them deliver these speeches in front of such important people on the Capitol Hill. So if they can do it, every single one of us can do it. So I would like to share this speech with you. Good morning, we are so-and-so, and here we go. A widely accepted definition of anti-Semitism comes from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, which says anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. It can be directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals of their property. toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. In 2022, the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, reported 3,693 anti-Semitic incidents throughout the United States. This is a 36% increase from 2021 and the highest number on record since ADL began tracking anti-Semitic incidents in 1979. There have been countless acts of anti-Semitism in recent years, including shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York, and California's Poway community. The October 7th attack by Hamas in Israel has only increased the violence and anti-Semitism in America. The Center for Study of Hate and Extremism in California State University, San Bernardino, closely tracks hate crime data. Listen to this. Between October 6th and October 26, 2023, Los Angeles alone witnessed a staggering 32 reported hate incidents targeting Jews. Let that sink in. In just 20 days, there were more than 30 documented cases of hate against my community. This alarming statistic, paralleling what we are seeing across the country, underscores the urgent need for attention and action in addressing this disturbing trend on a national level. We are here on behalf of the Religion Action Center of Reform Judaism. So this issue holds a special significance to us as proud American Jews. Anti-Semitism is not only a common issue to us, but one that deeply connects the Torah and other teachings of Judaism. The Talmud, our rabbinic collection of Jewish law, teaches that one who takes a life, it is as though they have destroyed the universe. And one who saves a life, it is as though they have saved the universe. In other words, each person's unique experience of the world is equivalent to their own universe. Thus, when religious bias takes a life, their universe is destroyed. Too many universes are being endangered in my community today. When anti-Semitism is ignored or discounted as less important than other kinds of hatred, it threatens the lives of me and 7.6 million American Jews throughout the country. By helping us fight anti-Semitism, one does just as the Talmud teaches. You are saving the universe. Even more so, in my experience, learning Jewish history and tradition, the pattern of religious oppression and prejudice is deeply rooted in what it means to be Jewish. From the biblical stories of Moses in Egypt and Esther on Purim, to the historical stories of the Inquisition in Spain, the Holocaust in Europe, the fight against religious prejudice is an extension of the war that has been waged since prehistory. Only our direct action can defeat these forms of religious prejudice. By standing up against religious hatred, you help us protect Jews and all people of minority religions. Unfortunately, my biggest experience with anti-Semitism came from one of my favorite places, the pool deck. I've played water polo for the past 4 years, and it quickly consumed over 30 hours of my week. To play a sport built on dedication, determination, and love means everything to me. However, in the week following the October 7th attack, more specifically on the Wednesday, October 11th, it all changed. At my congregation, you can often find me on the bima with a guitar in my hands and leading my congregation in song and prayer. And I was very honored when the clergy members at my temple asked me to help lead a vigil for those lost in the initial attacks. I instantly accepted the offer from my cantor, yet it meant I had to leave my water polo practice about 15 minutes early. I emailed my head coach in advance and went to practice just like every Wednesday of my life for the last 4 years. In the middle of swim sets, my assistant coach, who had made questionable remarks about my Judaism before, asked me why I had to leave early. I told him, the clergy members at my temple asked me to help lead the service, and I don't want to smell like chlorine in front of 200 people. He quickly responded, why? I responded, because I was asked to help lead a vigil for my people, and it is important to me. Instantly, I heard, that's not important. If you were committed to water polo, you would stay for the whole time. At that moment, I had to decide whether or not I was going to stick up for myself and my Jewish teammates and community, or if I was going to let my coach, a person who was supposed to uplift me instead of putting me down. I decided to stand up for myself. I said, it is important. My people are being killed, taken hostage, suffering, and are scared. But before I could get in another word, he said, they are not your people. My heart sank and broke into a million pieces. One of the biggest parts of my identity was just neglected by an ignorant man who, instead of wanting to see how he could help his player through the darkest of times, decided to degrade and belittle me. I tried to explain to him how, as a Jew, the people of Israel, American Jews, and all Jews are considered my people, but nothing could get through him. After I finished my sets, I left and had never felt so angry in my life. I didn't understand how my coach could make me feel that my need to grieve and be with my people was wrong, that my Judaism did not matter. When I got home, my mom instantly knew something was up, and for the first time in over 3 years, I cried. I broke down in my mom's arms and told her what my coach had said. After discussion on what to do and how to go about the inappropriate behavior of my coach, my mom said something that truly scared me. And she said, well, we know they won't hide us if it comes to be that time, like our ancestors had to during the Holocaust. That weekend, I decided to live one of my favorite parts of life. I could no longer play for a team or engage in an environment where I and my faith were not respected, and in a place where I did not feel safe to be me. To be honest, 4 months later, I still don't know if I made the right decision. I am deeply conflicted on whether or not I should have stayed on the team, most likely lose my varsity spot and act like nothing had happened, or if leaving truly allowed my coach the opportunity to examine his behavior, his comments, and how they affected me. I wonder if my leaving demonstrated to my other teammates how I protected myself from an unsafe situation, even if it meant losing what I loved most. Thankfully, our government is taking steps towards protecting Eden, Lily, and myself and other American Jews from religious prejudice. In June 2023, Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire reintroduced the bipartisan Pray Safe Act. The Pray Safe Act would direct the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Department of Justice, the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, and other federal agencies to establish a federal clearinghouse through which faith-based organizations and houses of worship can access information and safety and security practices, federal grant programs, and training opportunities. This bill will help ensure that religious communities have the training and financial resources to improve security and keep worshipers safe. It is important to note that this bill does not only target anti-Semitism, but other forms of religious hatred from every group. This bill is a huge leap towards achieving religious equality and saving the lives of millions affected by religious bias. By supporting this bill, the Congresswoman will protect and strengthen the First Amendment's freedom of religion. We urge Senator Butler to co-sponsor the Pray Safe Act and join us in protecting freedom of religion in our country. Thank you so much for your time. If you're around on March 8th, please come and support Lily and Noah and Eden that wrote this speech and the other teens of that troop, as we're going to celebrate them, their courage, their incredible abilities of speaking up, of standing up for themselves, for us and for so many different people. So we have a special family Shabbat, and we're gonna honor our Leta canteens, and this will be awesome if you can come. And just to end up on my side, unless there are questions and remarks, which I'm happy always, the Talmud tells us and teaches us, it is not for us to end the work, but it does not give us the freedom not to do our part. So just remember, every single one of us changes the world every single day with every single step we make, with every single act we take, with every single word that comes up out of our mouths. It's depressing 100%. But who will make it better if not every single one of us? This is our duty. This is our ability. And thank God that we have such incredible young people to show us and to inspire us how it's done in the most beautiful, genuine, authentic way. So I hope you will get inspired by them as I am. And although it seems very, very dark, every single one of us turns on the lights of this world. So let us continue to do so. And hopefully we will always be on the side of the light that is destined to overcome the darkness. Thoughts, questions, ideas?
Bravo, bravo.
Please.
I have a question. How did the government officials respond to the speeches that were given to them?
That's a great question. Nina is asking how the government official responded to the speeches. So we met with 3 offices. I believe that this speech was read twice. So it was really interesting. One office, they had like a kind of a younger staff, and they were taking notes, and they asked some questions, and they were like, we will check and we'll come back to you. Which I know from previous years that it has been done. But then the other 2 offices, it was actually pretty incredible. We met with the office of Julia Brownlee, which is the House of Representative for this district. She wasn't there, although Rabbi Paul and I met with her in her office in Thousand Oaks, literally a week beforehand. And we told her that we were coming. And the person that she had in her team to meet with our group, a young person, and she, out of her own will, shared with us at the very beginning that she's a Reformed Jew. And as they read the speech, she went on to check if Brownlee is on the already co-sponsoring the bill. And I think out of the 3 that we read to her, she said that she's already co-sponsoring 2 of them. And the third one, she said, I will make sure that we're on it, which is very powerful. And the other office was another congresswoman. She again wasn't there, but we met with the senior staff that also were very, very friendly and responsive. Like there was a conversation. They asked questions about what they heard, and they also wrote down to make sure that she's gonna co-sponsor it. And she said, we will definitely get back to you. I actually already received an email or 2 kind of as a follow-up from several of them. So it was very powerful. And for a 16-year-old or 17-year-old to be in this position, and I mean, it's just amazing. I know that you have a lot of things to say about the political system in America, but some elements of that are very, very, very powerful. And this is, I think, is truly the best example. Then we also had someone whose mom is a big, big, big activist. And the person that we met, which was on the team of the congressperson, said, I received a lot of emails and phone calls from this person. And Tia was like, that's my mom, which was like amazing. I mean, it's like, right? So by the way, education in the house that we are growing up in.
How did you select which members of the House?
And it's they divided according to the state people are from. So the program is national. RAC, they sit in DC and they work, they have a lot of connections on the Capitol Hill, and they make the connections according to the state of the participants, and then whoever is available.
Not only the state, but the actual district.
And the district,
Yeah,
of course.
they, like,
Yes,
look
yes,
at
yes.
the-
Isn't
So-
that a softball approach? In other words, there's some in the House that it would, you'd have a different resignation.
It can happen.
I mean, I'm not gonna name names, but
No, so,
I mean, there's one color green I don't like, but nevertheless.
oh, yes, yes.
I mean.
I did hear in recent years, I don't think for us, for this community, but I heard about other communities that met with their representatives and they were not on the same page. And it did not necessarily go very well, which is very unfortunate because essentially they are the next generation of voters, right? And they're coming to kind of to be vocal and to stand up for what they believe in. So even if you disagree, do it afterwards, not in front of them, if you want to get their vote. But we had really, it was just an incredible experience. And also very sad, the story that I just shared with you, it happened in a high school, which is 5 minutes from here. And this particular teen cannot go and talk about it out in the open in this high school, which is literally 5 minutes drive from here. And we have tons of teens in this community that go to this high school. So it's not like we're talking about something amorphic that is happening elsewhere. This is the everyday
But shouldn't that
of
be
our
something?
life.
You mentioned the organization that will go out and talk to that. school.
Yes,
Shouldn't
absolutely.
they be doing that?
They absolutely should. Yeah,
I
Yeah.
think Richard has a question.
yeah, we're working on it. Yes, Richard.
Hi there. So
Hello.
a great presentation. A couple of comments. First, for those interested in knowing more about the rise of fascism, anti-Semitism, and Nazism in America in the 30s and 40s, Rachel Maddow wrote a book called Prequel, which outlines the rise of fascism and anti-Semitism in the 30s and 40s. And she wrote it as an analogy to what's going on today. So it's very informative. The other thing, I agree with you that there was a time I could intellectualize being anti-Zionist and not being anti-Semitic, but after October 7th, I don't buy into that anymore. The other thing I find interesting is that on the far left, when Assad was killing 400,000 of his people, nobody said anything. On the left, when Ukraine was invaded by Russia, nobody said anything. But for Israel and the Jews, when something happens, and Hamas, which is dedicated to the destruction of Judaism in Israel, everyone shouts and supports them on the far left.
Yeah, I will even echo what you're saying, Richard, and I'll say that we have a congregant here, new family. I think they just joined, and they have a kid in Kesher. And at the beginning of, after October 7th, which was the beginning of the school year, basically, we did just kind of open circles for parents to come and speak with Rabbi Paul and me, kind of about how to talk with their kids about everything that's going on. And it said something that is still kind of, I walk with it. So he is from Ukraine. He's Jewish, but originally from Ukraine. And he said that last year, already almost 2 years ago, when the war in Ukraine started, that was very, very, very painful. But being in America, when this happened, everybody kind of were very clear on which side to pick. For most people, there was no question whether to support Ukraine or to support Russia. It was not even an equivalent of any sort. It was clear to everybody. And now that this is going on in Israel, he finds himself in the minority in most of the places that he's in his life, minus the Jewish community whenever he comes here. And that is a completely different story of whom people choose to side with without even kind of exploring the facts. And by the way, I will say that at this point where we are right now, it's not even about picking sides. I mean, we're talking about close to 30,000 Palestinians that lost their lives in this war. And I don't want to diminish it for 1 second, but only to talk about this and not to talk about what happened on October 7th. How did it all started? And the level of just cruelty that was done intentionally to civilians in their own bedroom at 6 o'clock in the morning, or people that were dancing for peace in a music festival, is just not in the same comparison of any conversation, whichever painful result kind of coming from that until now. But anyway, it's just if anybody wants to read Dara Horn's book and have a conversation, a follow-up conversation about it, we can do that. And Richard, what's the title again? I heard about it from several people.
It's called Prequel by Rachel Maddow.
Want to take
She
a vote on your
also-
idea?
Wait, one sec. She also did a podcast before she did the book, and the podcast is called Ultra. ULTRA, and you can go to your favorite podcast place and find it. It's quite well done.
Thank you.
So do you want to take a vote on whether to read that book and have a little get together about that? As far as if you have enough people to justify it?
We could, which one? Which one of
The
them?
Dara,
The Dara Horn? Any interest in reading a wonderful book with the title? What was the
Something-
title? People Love Dead Jews.
I
Very
don't know how much
inviting.
more I can handle.
I know. I intend to read it. If you're reading it also, shoot me an email or a text and we'll get together.
Okay. What about the next classes with, what's coming up?
Next class is about the history of the Reform movement. It's gonna be 4 sessions on 4 continuous Wednesdays, starting with the last Wednesday in March.
Okay.
I believe it's either the 26th or the 27th, and then 4 weeks that will bring us to Passover. We'll end before Passover.
I believe Romy has a question.
Romy,
Hi, Rob, Ilana. Thank you so much
Hello.
for a good discussion. I do have a question because I want to make sure I'm listening to you accurately. Are you saying that anti-Zionism, anti-Israel equal anti-Semitism?
I'm not saying that. I'm raising that as a question. I'm saying that when we discuss about the different genres of anti-Semitism throughout many, many centuries, then the new sort of genre of the conversation in the current time is anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, and the question is if it equals anti-Semitism. And I say
Well,
that,
my question is, if you're critical of Israel, is that heard as anti-Semitism?
nowadays, I believe the answer is yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
But a lot of people within Israel are anti, at least the politics of the government. of Israel.
of it.
But
And
I
they're
think
not
there,
anti-Semitic.
and there is a big difference being against
Yeah.
government or against the country as an
Right.
entity,
No,
as a,
Absolutely.
you know, as a fact in life, kind of,
I think the difference though, if you're in Israel, you're talking different than if we're in America.
for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think you meant all criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic. You're saying criticism of Israel as a state.
Yes,
But if I say, well, I don't like Netanyahu's policies on this or that, that doesn't make me anti-Semitic.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it. Thank you all.
Laila Tov.